While I was halfway through, I felt like I saw someone moving behind my car as I turned my head. There was nothing but shadows of the trees under the moonlight. The jungle was strangely quiet and there was nothing inside as far as my eyes could see. After I was almost 4 kilometers in the jungle, I saw someone faintly in red dress, almost half kilometers ahead. After coming close, I saw a lady in a red dress, alone in the jungle, walking towards me. It was a pretty strange coincidence, since this had never happened, and there was no possibility of a human who could be there this time at such a dark place. So I thought maybe her car was broken down, or she might be from a nearby village who was waiting for her husband or something like that. So I immediately stopped the car and wanted to inquire what was the issue and how I may assist her. She had really long hair and very dark hands. Being a medical doctor, I'm not really a big believer of paranormal or supernatural beings, so I did not give it much thought, yet I was a bit concerned because she looked very thin. As my car approached her, I suddenly saw her feet, and it was a moment when my life just stopped because her feet were totally inverted backwards, and she had a lot of jewelry around her neck and gold bangles in her hand. I immediately knew what trouble I was into. Without giving a second thought, I immediately put my full foot on the accelerator. As soon as I crossed her, she started to laugh hysterically and was shouting loudly. One thing that just started to make me sweat like crazy was that she was calling my wife's name, and I had no idea how she knew her and why she was calling her name. I was smart enough to fastly cross her and was relieved that I was close to the bridge. I had heard whenever you encounter a such entity, it's better to never look back in the mirror. But curiosity overtook me, so I turned my head to see if I was at a safe distance. My heart dropped and my feet got numb, as that creature was sitting in the back seat. As I saw her, she started to scream and laugh at the same time, and I was frozen like a cold stone. Being a religious person, I immediately started to recite holy verses. She immediately screamed and scratched my back with her really long nails, and the last thing that I remembered was she said, "Jenny will kill you." It was a surprising thing for me as I woke up 2 days later in a nearby hospital, and it took me almost 5 minutes just to understand where I was. I was told that they had found me unconscious in my car beside the bridge where the car was almost gonna drop. I was lucky that a woodworker who was passing by at dawn had found me and immediately reversed the car and took me to the hospital, as my back was badly scared by something. Drinking for the hospital staff was that my back was not healing, as they had tried everything to tend it, my wounds, but they were constantly bleeding. Only I knew what had happened, so I requested him to bring holy water. As he came by, he saw my wounds. Even he was surprised to say how I had survived an encounter with scratches from a deadly creature. After tending my wounds, he asked me what had I done to provoke such an entity. So I started my story, which goes back almost 5 years. I told him after college becoming a doctor was my only ambition, since I belonged to medical background. Being successful in life was essential for me, so I started my med school, and I was a very hardworking student, though I was not a topper, but yet I was good enough to manage decent grades, and I was very keen on participating in extracurricular activities, be it sports or debates. Right after second year, we were having a debating competition between different colleges. That's where I met Jenny, as she was a very gorgeous lady with a very articulate, well-mannered, and a professional outlook. The most interesting thing about her was that she was a very bold person with a funny side and was not hesitant in making jokes or pointing out things. This was something that really captured my attention, and I got interested in her. As we were preparing our debates, we made a bet that whoever wins will host the dinner. She agreed, and to my surprise, she won and took first prize. And I was glad that she'll be having dinner. Next day, I put on my most favorite suit and got into the car. I picked her up at around 7 and we went to the most fine restaurant in the neighborhood. I really enjoyed her company as she was also the funniest girl I ever met in a really long time. Her personality was very professional and warm at the same time. She knew what she wanted from life as her goals were pretty clear. Her goal was to be a lawyer and serve the local community the best way possible. Though we both were from very different backgrounds and had very different features ahead of us, yet we clicked and started to go on dates almost on a regular basis. We started having a really good time, and the best thing about her company was that I got to learn new stuff almost on a daily basis. I was always very much impressed by her ambition and dedication towards her profession. We both fell in love with each other and were pretty much dedicated towards the relationship that we had developed, and we promised to serve our community as best as we could. As we got married, our relationship started to decline pretty fast, and I was a doctor and a high earner, while she was a lawyer and was very insistent on not having a prenup and having equal division of properties. This is where our conflicts started to arise, and I tried my best not to engage in such debates, yet she was persistent. We started to drift apart, and we were in a very cold relationship where we barely met each other and mostly at the end of the day just to have dinner together. It was such a sad experience to go through all this just because of some properties and all that we had built with our hard-earned money. Though I had no issues sharing it all with her, yet there was something that was stopping me doing so. And then what I had been fearing for a long time happened. She definitely cheated on me with her boss. This was one of the most painful things to know, as I definitely had an idea that she was an ambitious person, but I had no clue that basically she's a gold digger and she's a professional hunter who will always hunt for higher bids. One day a strange thing happened as the manager of our favorite restaurant called me and said that the booking that your wife just made for the two, we had to cancel due to urgent maintenance. This took me by surprise as we had no such plans. I was in a kind of shock since it had been months that we had visited that place. I just casually asked him when the last reservation was made. He replied, "Last week, sir." Then I went on to ask how many before that. He very easily replied that almost every other weekend reservation for 2 people has been made. It was quite ironic for me as I made a plan to tag along and see what actually was happening. I requested him to book another table just on the opposite side of the restaurant, far enough for me to see. And guess what? She was sitting with her office boss and they both were laughing while holding each other's hands. This really boiled up my blood, yet I somehow managed to keep calm as I wanted to see where it all went. To my surprise, after lunch they both went to our home. I had not imagined this happening. As they entered my home, they were in the living area and were discussing something, though I could not hear clearly, so I also entered from the back door very quietly to hear what actually was happening and also to record it as an evidence. And I entered behind the kitchen. They both were laughing and were planning to cut me off from my own properties and how to take it all from me and file a case against me for domestic abuse and divorce. This shook me to the core. Despite being a differences and disagreements, I've always been the most kind husband to her. Yet she was planning to find reasons for divorce and to kick me out of my own home under the liability of domestic abuse so that she and her boss could have my whole life earning. Soon her boss left the home while she was planning on some legal documents. I immediately stood up and came in front of her. First, she just froze and with her wide eyes open, she looked at me and started asking, "What are you doing here?" I simply played back all the recordings. Horror in her eyes was unusual. She immediately stood up, grabbed a knife and started to attack me. I was shocked by what she was doing, though it was a very impulsive decision, yet she managed to attack me and stabbed my arm with a really deep cut. As I was trying to defend myself, I grabbed a plate and threw at her, which by chance missed her head. Yet she slipped her foot and was out of balance and immediately hit her head at the corner of the table. pool of blood was everywhere, so she was lifeless body as she immediately died there at the spot. I had no idea what to do next, as if I tried to contact the police, they would have blamed me and her boss would have filed a strong case against me. So at midnight, I quietly made a grave in our backyard and put her body there and covered it up with the soil. Although I was very sad about what had happened, it was not enough. I started to see strange visions and very horrific dreams. Strange things also happened to me, as sometimes things would move or suddenly light would be turned on or turned off. I started to get afraid of those strange occurrences, so I sold off my property and moved to another city just to have a peaceful mind, and then suddenly on the way tonight this strange thing has happened. After explaining all this to the pastor, I requested him to help me with the supernatural issues. He gave me holy water and prayed for me. He advised me not to go out late at night and to start giving to charities. Being spiritual and dedicating oneself to good causes also helps uplift these kinds of curses. I took his advice and started meditating regularly. I also started giving charities, and since I was a doctor, I also started a free clinic on weekends. These occurrences started to fade away eventually as I became more of a positive person and more of a community helper. Ultimately, it was spirituality that saved my life. Otherwise, I had no idea how far these things would have gone just to curse me or make my life hard. Now, I not only serve the community, but also help others lifting their curses.